Hello and welcome to another episode of Acceptable Madness. My name is Scott McKinney and I talk about things related to depression and anxiety and stuff in a very open and vulnerable environment. I'm not a doctor, so don't take anything I say for complete and total truth. This is pretty opinionated, but I still think it might be able to help people, so that's why I do it. Today, I would like to talk about what I know is an important milestone for me, and that is my 2-year anniversary. Not of this podcast, but we're coming up on a year for that, which is also exciting, even though I've been listening back to some of my old stuff, like episodes 1 through 10, because I'm transitioning to putting them all onto YouTube. And so I've been doing that. And dude, they're cringy as fuck. Like, I'm proud of the fact that I did them. I'm happy with them. I'm thrilled with the fact that I had the willingness to be vulnerable and put myself out there. But man, they're really bad. I like them. I'm happy with them. But compared to some of the more recent episodes that I do, even in terms of audio quality, audio volume, and quality of conversation, they're nowhere near what the podcast is now, which is good because it shows growth, and I'm happy to be the one growing. But no, the 2-year anniversary that I'm referring to is actually I have been in a committed relationship with my girlfriend, Alex, for 2 years. That was actually, yes, I'm recording this on September 12th. Our anniversary is the unfortunate date of 9/11. But that, we try to look past the number, and we had a good time anyway. We went out to dinner. We went to an arcade after, and we just played games with each other. And then we came back and played a few more games, and we went to bed. And it was a genuinely good day. We both enjoyed ourselves. We both had a lot of fun. And there wasn't, so like I can be someone that's very frugal and cautious about money, as she can, but not as much as me. I can get very stressed about spending money, and I basically tried to kind of push all of those thoughts and fears down as much as I could and just tried to enjoy the evening. And it was really fun. I got a nice pork chop. We went to an expensive restaurant. She got a nice steak. And it was just a genuinely good time. And that's something that 2 years ago, I never would have expected. And I can give you a multitude of reasons for why. And I think the thing I want to talk about first, I don't know if I've talked about it on here before because it's something that I am a little bit embarrassed about. But I don't think I have any reason to be, so I'm going to open up about it. And it's the start of how Alex's and my relationship actually began. Now, I'm not going to go into any of the super, personal details because there's no reason to do that. But I want to talk about what went through my head to allow myself to actually have a committed relationship, and then what went through my head to maintain it, and how did I overcome all of the stress and the worries and the anxiety and the commitment issues and all that shit. How did I overcome all of it to get to dating someone for 2 years successfully? So, with all of that being said, I'm going to start by talking about how the relationship started. Now, we met because I was a resident assistant in college, and she was one of the residents that that was living on the same floor as me. So I was her resident assistant. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically just someone that tries to settle disputes and maintain a healthy environment for people that are living in a particular area in the building, in whatever building they're in. So I met her through that, and I thought she was nice. She has a twin sister. I also thought she was nice and still think both of them are quite nice, obviously. And we started a friendship just by playing a bunch of games. Now, in that time, it is no secret, Alex has been very forward with me and telling me that she was interested in me very early on in us meeting, and it took me much longer to get to that point. And so we were friends close friends for, I don't know, like probably a year and a half before we started dating. And in that time, I found out that she was interested in me, and I did everything in my power to put distance between us. Not because I had anything wrong with her, or because I found her unattractive, because I think she's great and I find her incredibly attractive. So it has nothing to do with like any sort of real rational reason for why I was trying to create that space, other than the fact that I had like severe commitment issues. And I was worried about actually maintaining and having and being a part of a real relationship, or even thinking about it. Like I was, I'm a guy in college, so most people, it's hard when you're searching for your identity. It's hard to not be affected by like the tropes that you see in popular media, like movies and TV. So you look at a typical guy in college, and that typical guy is like good with women and super confident and pretty douchebaggish. Fuck, I don't know what I'm saying, but he's a douchebag. And it was hard for me while I was trying to figure out who Scott McKinney was to not like see those and be like, is that the kind of person that I want to be? So instead of thinking about becoming a part of a serious relationship, I was more focused on the prospect of dating around. Now, that being said, I was never good at dating around. I was actually absolutely fucking terrible at it. I had no success with women, and honestly, putting myself out there was just the most awkward thing for me, and I never really wanted to get better at it. And I also had a tendency to, in retrospect, I think what I was doing was I liked Alex, but I wasn't like really aware of it because I was too busy being focused on the fact that I was trying to create space between us. So I would pursue women that were totally unattainable for one reason or another. Like some, for example, were friends of friends of friends that I had no contact with and had never really done anything or talked with them at all, but I found them somewhat attractive. So I would basically get this just this like infatuation with this person that I couldn't understand. Then I had a really hard time moving past it. But more than that, I would share the information about who I was infatuated with Alex. Now, again, in retrospect, super douche. Man, I'm falling into that same trap again. I thought I was being a super douchebag, and I was being one because I was basically just trying to sabotage that relationship because I didn't want to be part of it at that moment. And so I was, again, trying to create this space. Well, eventually I went on a few absolutely terrible dates with women that I didn't care for that much, and some weren't interested in me. Some were kind of interested in me. But I always managed to put up a wall or do something that like would ruin it, or like I'd get really uncomfortable and it just wouldn't work out. So whatever the reason was, I never really had a productive relationship. And I think part of the reason was I was going after these people, or these women that I was never actually like super interested in. I dated one that I met through work, and it only lasted for about 2 weeks because I learned that I think she was a little racist, and that was enough for me to just call it. But I had like impulsively jumped into that relationship, and then it fell apart really fast. And it went from me having commitment issues to me feeling like I had this sense of security, this sense of belongingness and comfort with this woman. So, it escalated quickly. We were saying like, I love you pretty quickly. And just like you would expect from like an early high school relationship or someone that hasn't really dated before, because at that point I definitely fell under that category. And it fell apart really quickly. She went to another school. I broke up with her over like Skype or something and got some angry messages from her friends. And I can't even fault them because the way that I handled it was just kind of immature and not amazing. But all of that to say, eventually after I had a lot of failed dates and after I was really, really struggling with my mental health. I actually, many different times, there were points where I like was going to kill myself, or like was really, really close to committing. Like there were times where I knew I wanted to stay alive, but at the same time I knew that I was absolutely contemplating suicide to the most serious degree imaginable. Like I was thinking about it, I was thinking about how I'd do it, I was thinking about when, I was thinking about what I would write. And so what I did was I just laid in my bed and let those thoughts pass, like bawling in tears. And I texted the one person that I found that would listen and would help me out. And that person happened to be Alex, because a lot of the friends that I had, I either, like a lot of my more male friends, I would never open up with them. I would never let myself feel vulnerable. And whether that reason is because of just that typical, like, men don't share feelings, or just the fact that I wasn't super comfortable with it, whatever it was, I just didn't have that kind of relationship with a lot of guys at that point. And I didn't have that relationship with a lot of women because I had a hard time talking with women. And but Alex was always there. So I texted her while I'm like freaking out, like crying, like hysterically, and she was actually with her friends, but she was willing to take some time and text me, and that was all that mattered. All that mattered was someone showing some sort of compassion to me that made me feel like I mattered and feel like it was worth continuing. And it really helped. And that was one of the first moments that, and there's a chance that I'm misremembering the order of some of these events, so I'll put that out. But the only one that'll ever correct me is Alex, but I'm sure she will. But that doesn't really matter. But ultimately what ended up happening is that moment helped me to open up a little bit more. I think that happened in the winter of 2016, like December 2016 or something. Like it was a really, really hard time for me. That's actually whenever I started writing a lot more, because I was really struggling with my mental health. I really needed to find some sort of outlet, or else I was literally going to commit suicide. And so I texted Alex, and the friendship that we had, I was still putting up these like artificial walls between us, and I was still preventing myself from really like sharing what I was feeling or talking with her in a really serious way where I was feeling vulnerable, and I actually shared what I was feeling with her besides that one night. But it took me a while. And then actually 2 or 3 months later, we started dating. And so in March, so like I said, like 2 or 3 months later, we actually got together, and it kind of started, it didn't really start through like me asking her out or her asking me out. It just kind of happened. But the entire time I was absolutely like struck with these commitment issues that I'd been feeling like my whole life. Like, why does anyone want to date me? The thought of being in a relationship scared the hell out of me, because that kind of, it's nice. It gives you that feeling of comfort and security, and you always have that one person if you really trust them, which I do trust Alex, and I have the entire time we've been dating. I started to really struggle with that. I struggled with all of it, because a few of the other thoughts that I was conflicted with were the fact that, and they'll vary in how ridiculous they sound, but some of the more realistic ones that I felt were realistic at the moment were, I always feel like I'm a burden on people. And so like I hated myself. And so while I was busy hating myself, I was thinking, why would anyone else like me? And wouldn't it be better if I was just alone all the time until I inevitably killed myself? Because I don't think, like, I feel like my existence is only making people's lives worse. That was my thought. And so it was hard for me to imagine being in a relationship where there's so much commitment and reliance on each other, or on each person in the relationship. The other thought I had was anytime I really struggled with something serious, I always had this thought in this dream of just running away, like abandoning my family, not talking to anybody, not talking to my friends, just leaving. And if I'm in a relationship, I feel like I just can't do that. I wouldn't allow myself to do it. And that scared me because that was always like this attainable out where anytime I wanted to, I could just up and leave. And who would care? And ultimately, looking back at that, I think that if I ever did do that, I likely would have ended up killing myself at some point shortly thereafter. But it was still something that in the moment was appealing to me, that thought of, if this doesn't work out and if I keep struggling with all of this, then I feel comfortable just leaving. So those are two thoughts that I had. And then the other one that I had, which actually scared the shit out of me, and, I spent the first however many minutes of this episode talking about my lack of success with women. I had these weird thoughts of being in an open relationship, not because I wanted it, because I don't view that as like a conducive way to have an emotional bond with someone, because it's so dividing for so many obvious reasons. And I feel like you can't be in an open relationship and actually truly love someone, because, like, at least in my own mind, you need to be fully 100% committed to whomever you're dating. But the thought of an open relationship was appealing to me because it meant that my options were still open. It's not like I had anything against Alex in any conceivable way, but it was just that I was feeling cornered and I was feeling trapped because of the exclusivity that is a relationship. So all of these things really, really, like, terrified the hell out of me. Just absolutely awful. At first, when we started dating, we spent a few nights, like, sleeping in the same bed. And for, like, the first night or two, it was nice. And then afterwards, I felt like I was immediately uncomfortable, like, shortly thereafter for that, because I just felt like I was losing my personal space. And looking back at that, we were definitely, like, we were both excited about it. And she had liked me for a long time, and I had finally come around to admitting that I liked her. And so it was great, but it was also an absolutely terrifying thing for someone that has commitment issues, and it just scared me. So we dated for like a week or two, and it was fine. About a week in, I told her or I asked if we could sleep in separate beds, and that would make me more comfortable. And she didn't necessarily love that, but she agreed that it would probably be for the best. But then once that happened, that was I think that was my way of putting more space between me and her. And so I didn't want to share a bed with her every night. That was too much for me at the moment. But I didn't want to put up this wall between us entirely, and I wasn't able to differentiate between those two things. So after we spent one night, or after we spent the first few nights apart, I started resurrecting the walls that were between us. I didn't talk to her as much. We were still dating, but I wasn't as nice and open and welcoming. I wasn't as willing to be vulnerable and talk to her about what was going through my head. And about a month after we started dating, so I think it was March, about a month later, I just said it wasn't working out, and I just wasn't interested in her in that way. And the relationship ended. So we'll say that's April, although it's an approximate, but we'll say it's April. So I've just broken up with her after 1 month of dating, and neither of us took it super well. I went back to, like, my old ways of just continuing to feel like a burden, stressing myself out with the prospect of dating or even thinking about it. Like, I couldn't even imagine dating after that. Not because I was, like, so affected by the end in that way, but it was just I felt like I was undateable, and that me being in the dating pool was negative to the world and whoever I would end up encountering. And for that entire summer between semesters, I tried to not talk to Alex as often as possible. I created excuses. We live probably about like 45, 50 minutes apart from each other. So at least whenever we lived at our own parents' house while we were both in college. And she always wanted to hang out, or not always, but occasionally she just wanted to do something, and I canceled or made different plans or came up with some excuse. And talking about it, man, I feel absolutely horrible because there were some really traumatic things that happened to Alex during that summer that I wasn't there for her to help her out. And so it's stuff that I'm not happy with myself and that I'm still to this day struggling to forgive myself about, because it's like that's like a very dreaded part of my life, because that was a really, really hard time for me. But I'll just give an example of one of the things that I did. Her birthday came around during that summer, and we had planned to do something together on her birthday, and last minute I just canceled. I came up with some excuse, and I remember what the excuse was. I was writing the first book that I was working on, and I told her that I would rather not hang out that day because I was more interested in writing the book, which obviously shows this unempathetic thought and like the just uncaring mind that I had at that moment, where I would rather back out of someone's birthday plans and not fulfill the promises that I'd made. I would rather do that and work on my own project than do something little to help someone feel better. And looking back at that now, in the mindset that I have 2 years in the future, it's reprehensible. It's crazy to me that I ever even really felt that way at one point. But I understand why I did, and I don't hate myself for feeling that way, and I really am trying hard not to I'm really trying hard to not hate myself for reacting in the ways that I did around that time, because the amount of progress that I've gone through in the past 2 years has been astronomical, and it just comes from dedicating time to really thinking about it and trying to focus on bettering myself. And in that moment, I wasn't capable of doing it, and I hadn't really started doing it yet. And so back then, Scott was definitely an asshole, but he wasn't trying to be malicious in any way. He was just trying to figure out his own brain, and he didn't know how. And he thought that the best thing to do would be to create this distance and continue putting up walls. Now, in all this time, I haven't even stated that I don't know why the fuck Alex didn't move past me. I really have no idea. Even to this day, she wouldn't be able to answer that question. She doesn't know either. I don't know. And it surprises me, because I know that for me, whenever I was younger, if someone wronged me once, I would never talk to them again. And an example that I have is my freshman year of college. We were me and a friend named Dave were at an on-campus restaurant, and it was an all-you-could-eat buffet, and we were sitting at our table, and he stole a French fry. He didn't stole, that's an aggressive word, but he took a French fry off of my tray without asking and ate it, and I totally blew up. I lost it. I to this day still have not really talked to him. He just got married. I'm happy for him. But that relationship is effectively fucked, and it is all my fault, and it's unfortunate, but I'm just happy he's doing well, even if I'm not in his life. So that's the kind of thought, that was the kind of mentality that I had back then, and for Alex, I just consistently wronged her time and time and time and time again, from neglecting her on her birthday, to literally breaking up with her, to trying to create these excuses for not only why we shouldn't do something or hang out, but instead why we shouldn't date, or why I wasn't interested in her. I was trying to push her away by saying things that I didn't mean or didn't feel, because to me it was more important to push her away and move into a place of the emotional solitary confinement than it was to maintain that relationship or be kind or nice or just not terrible. So that summer passes, and I come back to school, and it's my last semester, which would have started in August of 2017. So, like a week or two after I neglect her on her birthday, I come back to school. I moved in with two friends that I still have good relationships with today. Great people, Nikos and Tyler. And Alex asks to come down. And I say, sure. And even though I have a car up there and she doesn't, I say, I don't really want to come pick you up, but I'd be happy to do something with you. So she walks like the half an hour to get to my apartment. And we just hang out, the four of us. And it was nice. It was really nice. And at this point, I had already discovered, as you could infer from what I said earlier, that I had already kind of found a way to, I was slowly starting to find ways to kind of vent, and I was finding ways to let my mental health kind of relax a little bit. Like, I was able to write, I was able to find things to write about that made me feel better, and I was able to do all of these things that were making me feel a bit more calm, a bit less suicidal, a bit less anxious. And it was great. So I was starting to do that. And then whenever Alex came back, even though I was still putting up these walls between us, the conversations I remember were better. They weren't so depressed and they weren't so Scott-centric. They started to be more about her. And not to say that I totally neglected talking about myself, because I can be a whiny bitch and vent and talk about myself all day and just complain for hours. But we talked, and they were more meaningful conversations. And shortly after we had that summer that I don't like remembering or thinking about, and I had already broken up with her, and she'd been following me, that she's not a stalker, I promise, but she'd been interested in me for a while and was hoping that I would come around sometime. And after I've done all of these terrible things to put up these walls, eventually they started to come down. And I started to encounter these feelings that I hadn't really felt before, because I had been interested in people, Alex included, but I had never let myself really feel any sort or form of affection for them. And so I started to feel this, and I went to some of my friends like Trevor and actually another Tyler, Trevor's brother, and my friend Kyle, and I started to ask. I was like, dude, what the fuck's going on? Like, I think I actually like her this time. Not that I didn't last time, but I think I really do this time. And most of their answers were the same. They're like, you spend most if not like all of your time with her. You know you like her. Shut the fuck up and go after it. And that was most of the conversations that I had with people. And I mean, obviously they were right, because shortly thereafter I had another freak out. I actually went home for a weekend, and then while I was at home, I started to really not know what to do with this whole Alex thing, like how I was feeling. So I was talking to my sister Kristen, and we just talked about, I was like, I think I like her. I don't know how to deal with this. I think I do. Like, and it sounds like something that an 8-year-old dealing with a crush would feel like, but it was the first time that I let myself emotionally feel for someone at more than an 8-year-old level. Like, I really was willing to put myself out there. And so on 9/11 of 2017, not knowing what the date was, not caring what time it was, because it was probably like 9 or 10 at night, I just called her, and we talked. And I kind of explained, hey, you know that thing we tried for a month, like 6 months ago? Might be interested in doing that again. And although she was a little hesitant because of obvious reasons, such as me breaking up with her in the past and being a complete and total asshole for a lot of our relationship, and even stuff that her totally reasonable and correct friends said about not dating me again, I we tried it again, and since then we've been happily dating since. And it's a great feeling, and it's one that I never thought I'd ever feel in my entire life. It's really cool to be part of a relationship that matters that much to me, and to now live with Alex and not freak out whenever we sleep in the same bed, and the fact that instead of feeling like in that first month that we dated, instead of feeling that awkward kind of like outside pressure, like I was being, like my space was being encroached upon, like now whenever we are close and falling asleep, I feel this sense of comfort and security and just happiness. And it's totally weird. It's just the weirdest thing for me to know that transformation happened in the short period of time that it did, and that since then I really haven't gone back to feeling that way entirely. There have been times where I have freaked out and questioned everything, but the first thing I do is I go to Alex and I tell her why I'm feeling that way and what thoughts are going through my head. And although she doesn't like hearing them, she's willing to help me kind of talk through them and understand them a little bit better. It's great. And it's crazy to me, because one thing that I said whenever I broke up with her was towards the end. One of the reasonings that I gave was, I don't want to date you because I don't see an out. So even in that moment, I knew that Alex and I could make it last for a really long time. But the prospect of that was so terrifying to me that I tried to run away from it entirely. And all I can say is I'm really glad that I didn't. But it's been one hell of a ride. Like we don't have a rom-com or like a romantic beginning to our relationship. Not many people do, but we certainly don't. But I'm just happy to be where we are, and I think she's great. And I'm happy that we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. And she knows it's coming eventually whenever, money is a bit more permitting, but I'm excited to eventually propose and make her my wife. So, that's the end of this story. Well, not like the story, but like, I guess this little tidbit of the story, if I really want to get all sappy and weird. But, look, the moral of this story is just keep pushing through whatever you're pushing through, because eventually there's going to be some light on the other side. Even if it takes years upon years upon years, if you come out on the other side, there's something good waiting for you. It might not be a person, but it might be something that you can really, really connect with. So, thank you for listening. I'm happy to have you along. I'm glad that I was able to share this story with you, and that I'm able to celebrate my 2-year anniversary with Alex. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.